Everyone, and welcome to the January 9th edition of the Ignition News. We have important news to share with you today and a breaking story brought to you exclusively from the Ignition News, reporting that directly contradicts Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security. We unearthed a 2013 report proving that the Department of Homeland Security specifically told its agents to stop getting in front of vehicles. I'm going to tell you all about that report today and what it means for the investigation, what happened to Renee Brown in Minneapolis. And of course, we've got a lot of other information. I do want to recognize a couple people who supported the show. Want to shout out Potato and Carmen and Marty, who kicked in to support the show over on Buy Me a Coffee. You can click the link in the bio. Best way to support the show is to go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. So that we can do that. And we'll talk about podcasts in a second too, because our show, in addition to supported by our fans, our show is supported by Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Ignite is our signature podcast teaching you how to fight fascism. The season 2 is going to be a banger. So let me just do a quick trailer for Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. One of season 2 is called How to Steal an Election. It's a show all about how to push back, how to save democracy. Let's get into the Ignition News. By the way, if you're not sure how to follow the show, we do have a daily news show that is on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. Just type The Ignition News or go to theignition.news and you can learn all about it. We've got, like I said, we've got an exclusive story for the Ignition News that we're going to kick into. As you know, on Wednesday morning, January 7th, an immigration and customs enforcement officer shot and killed Renee Nicole Good. She was 37 years old. She was a U.S. citizen, a mother of 3, a poet, and a writer. She was murdered in broad daylight on a residential street in South Minneapolis by a federal agent who claimed he feared for his life. Let's be very clear about what happened here, because the federal government is already lying about it. We've got multiple videos showing exactly what went down. Federal agents conducting immigration enforcement operations encountered Good's maroon Honda Pilot perpendicular in the street. Multiple witnesses say Good was blocking federal vehicles to protect her immigrant neighbors. The government calls her a rioter. The neighborhood calls her a compassionate neighbor trying to be a legal observer. In the videos, you can see an unmarked gray pickup pull up next to Good's SUV. Federal agents jump out. One walks straight to her driver's side door and starts yanking on it, screaming, "Get out of the car, get out of the fucking car." Another agent positions himself near the front of the video. Good reverses slightly, then she turns her wheels to pull away. The agent in front of her vehicle moves backward as she drives forwards and fires into her car. She crashes into a parked car and hits a light pole. That is what happened. The Department of Homeland Security spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin immediately claimed that Good weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over our law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them. This is important. We're going to talk about why it's important, because we found crucial evidence that proves that this is not the case, and indeed that this is practice and procedure from the Department of Homeland Security. We have broken a major story that conclusively proves that not only did Department of Homeland Security know that this was an issue, but they specifically told their officers in CBP and in DHS not to do what this officer did. We're going to tell you exactly what we learned, how we learned it, and we're going to teach you how to download this evidence before Customs and Border Patrol deletes it from history. Next, let's talk about what actually happened. You obviously have Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey saying that it's bullshit. I do want to give you a couple of little sort of more personal information about what happened there. You obviously have her wife was in the car with her. There were literally stuffed animals in the vehicle. Her 6-year-old child had just been dropped off at school. She's got a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old. She had moved to Minnesota later last year after her husband, who's a military veteran, died in 2023. And she was trying to build a new life. Now she's dead because a federal agent decided her car moving forward was sufficient cause to end her life. Here's what happened that makes it a lot worse, by the way. It didn't happen in isolation. This happened in the middle of what they're calling Operation Metro Surge, the Department of Homeland Security's deployment of approximately 2,000 federal immigration officers to Minneapolis. They're calling it the largest DHS operation ever. They've been posting about it on social media. Just a bunch of garbage, to be honest with you. Minneapolis does have the largest Somali diaspora in the United States. 58% of Somalis in Minnesota were born here. I think that's an important, it's an important important fact to point out. Of the foreign-born Somalis, 87% are naturalized citizens. So we're talking about people who are American-born or people who are naturalized citizens. Since early December, I don't know what just happened there. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of a technical issue. Since early December, they've arrested about 4. Obviously, we know that this is not the only incident where the United States government is acting inappropriately in Minneapolis. I do want to tell you about this because this is not being widely reported. Only a few hours after what happened with Renee Good, federal agents showed up at Roosevelt High School. That's about 3 miles from where she was killed. School was letting out. Hundreds of students were walking out of the building, and suddenly, according to multiple witnesses, a caravan of SUVs speeds up to the school entrance. Armed Border Patrol agents jumped out and started running towards the school. DHS says they were there because they'd been in a 5-mile car chase with a U.S. citizen who had rammed a government vehicle. This is important. Remember this. This is important. Rammed a government vehicle during immigration enforcement. They say the chase ended at the school. They say they were attacked by a teacher and had to use crowd control methods. So you have just hours after what happened with Good. See, this is the thing. What's happening is so crazy with Renee Good that we miss the fact that these fucking people went and terrorized a high school. It's insane. I mean, teachers and school students were trying to keep Border Patrol away from students, telling them to stay off school property. Agents were pushing teachers away. One teacher was getting tackled. Dozens of neighborhood residents were spilling out of their homes, blowing whistles and screaming at Border Patrol. And then, of course, there's Bovino. You got Greg Bovino. Unlike most of the other officers who cover their face, Bovino walked out to one of the school's entrances in full camouflage, trailed by an agent who appeared to be filming him. Multiple witnesses said that it looked like they were filming a reality TV show. He was standing in the doorway, and one of his men was filming him as he was looking at us with contempt. These fucking people are like filming reality TV shows in a school in America. This is insane. Obviously, parents were terrified. Students were terrified. You got the principal of Roosevelt High School saying, we can debate policy, but we cannot debate whether children deserve to feel safe at school. We cannot debate whether families deserve to stay together. The trauma that our kids are experiencing is real. The fear is real. The death and the pain are real. Minnesota schools are now shut down. Let us think about this for a second. Minnesota schools are shut down because they are protecting children from the federal government. They opted to allow people to come to have remote learning, right? Which is wild. Again, I think it's important. It's really important. Like I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to stop the show a little bit. I'm not doing enough justice to the fact that only hours after what happened to Renee Good, DHS goes and storms a school. And this story itself would normally be days and days and days of national news because of how atrocious this is, how irresponsible it is, how much, I mean, they obviously killed Renee Good. Obviously, that's a tragedy. They destroyed a family. But then they went to a school and they terrorized all of these children. And we're so busy with the shock and awe of what happened to Renee Good that we're not even able to address the fact that Greg Bovino's going to a school and filming a commercial, putting all these people in jeopardy. It's insane. See if I'm missing any part of that here. Yeah, it's uncalled for. Anyways, let's get into kind of the main segment of the show today. You'll have to forgive me. It's a lot to talk about. Welcome to the Ignition News, everybody. We have a daily news show called the Ignition News. It's not just streaming live here on TikTok. It's actually on Spotify. So I think I'll take a little bit of a break to talk about that because obviously a lot of people are learning about the show now. We're growing the show pretty substantially. And I have had people ask me, well, why you're talking about ICE? Why do you have your show on Spotify? We know that Spotify has been hosting ICE ads. So let me just take a little bit of a break to explain to you why I do that. Number one, ICE is apparently no longer advertising on Spotify. Number two, I host a show called Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. And then I have the Ignition News, a daily news show. The fact of the matter is I'm on a mission to fight fascism in the United States of America. And there's no better platform to host a podcast and distribute it quickly with the kind of reach that Spotify has. And idealistically, would I like to find another solution? Hell yeah, I tried. I tried to host the daily news show on Substack, which it is still on. But unfortunately, Substack is kind of hostile to this kind of platform, and I'm not able to have the same kind of reach. And so for those of you who have sort of like, you don't have Spotify, I do host the show elsewhere. So the same podcast goes on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. In fact, our largest audience is on Apple Podcasts, but it's also on Substack. The reality is that Spotify allows us to do the work that we do and allows me to do the work that I do to bring this news to you and to have the reach that I need to have. And, every now and then people kind of come at me for that, but I'm not going to apologize for reaching as many people as we can. My podcast about fighting fascism, The Guide to Fighting Fascism, That is in the top 5% of Spotify playlists for a reason, because it's a good show. Anyways, let's get on to really the crucial story. So we talked about what happened in Minneapolis. We talked about how they're terrorizing our children at schools, but I was able to uncover a report from Customs and Border Patrol, and this really is an incredible, and damning news story. Okay, so I know that some of you have probably heard about this by now, but let me just tell you, because if you remember from earlier in the show, you'll remember that ICE was allegedly chasing someone in their vehicle, and that's how they got to the school. Well, no one has seen this. No one has seen any kind of evidence to support that. Okay. Why is that? Well, here's the report that we found. Okay. In February 2014, the Los Angeles Times obtained a different report about U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, and they were trying to keep it secret from Congress. What we found was an independent review by the Police Executive Research Forum of 67 cases where Border Patrol agents used deadly force between January 2010 and October 2012. So what they did is they found 67 deadly use of force cases, 19 deaths. Here's what it found. Agents, everyone, this is important. An independent commission reviewed use of force cases by Customs and Border Patrol. What they found, an independent review found, agents have deliberately stepped in the path of cars to justify shooting at the drivers and have fired in frustration at people throwing rocks from the Mexican side of the border. You may remember this happening 2012, 2013, 2014. People were more focused on the reporting at the time, which was, why is CBP shooting people in Mexico that are throwing rocks? Do you remember this story? That was actually the big news at the time. It was people saying, Los Angeles Times was like, why are they shooting people throwing rocks? And so they pulled up this report, and what they found, CBP actually commissioned this study. You can go download the report right now from CBP. So why is this important? An independent expert found specifically, listen everyone, Border Patrol agents were stepping in front of cars to justify shooting people. It is a pattern of fact that they found. So when Kristi Noem says, oh, this agent was following his training, that is a verifiable and proven lie. We've caught Kristi Noem lying. Specifically, this report commissioned in 2013, and there was another report in 2014, specifically recommended Border Patrol agents stop using deadly force against rock-throwing people, and it specifically recommended changing the training protocol and procedure, and specifically told people to stop standing in front of vehicles. So when you go watch what happened, and you go watch what happened with the vehicle, you can see that this was not an accident. It does not appear that this was random. What it appears is that ICE is using this sort of dirty cop tactic that they have been using now for over a decade, where they step in front of a vehicle and say, oh my God, my life is at risk. I had to shoot someone. We know this may be the case now because every single ICE shooting this year has been this exact scenario. ICE it's at least 5, as many as 9 cases where they have specifically stood in front of vehicles, or that's what I'm alleging. I am alleging this. What ICE is saying is that the person used their vehicle as a weapon. Okay, this is too much of a coincidence for us to simply ignore. And what I might suggest to you is that the reason we know what happened here in this instance is because someone happened to be filming at exactly the right time and exactly the right angle for Renee Good. If no one had been filming, it's likely that ICE would have simply said, this person tried to run into them, that's why we shot them. And we can't trust ICE, DHS, CBP, and certainly not Kristi Noem. We know what we saw with our own eyes. That man was not in front of that vehicle. That man inserted himself in front of the vehicle. As an investigation clearly proved over a decade ago, almost 15 years ago now, a separate investigation found that CBP officers were deliberately stood in front of vehicles to justify shooting people. This agent was also in another incident where he was in a a vehicular assault. That's how we found out who he was. So it is not only very suspicious, this pattern and practice of behavior, but we know specifically that when Kristi Noem says he was following his training, she is lying to us. She is lying to us about what's happening because the 2014 report, the 2013 investigation specifically said, stop doing this. Stop getting in front of vehicles. Okay, every competent law enforcement official knows, okay, let's just say they had a justification to arrest Renee Good. She wasn't doing anything violent prior to the engagement. She was, I mean, you can argue that she was obstructing law enforcement. Okay, these are not violent. Obstructing law enforcement is not, in her case, was not a violent crime. Okay, so if Renee Good was getting away, if that's their justification, oh, she was fleeing the scene, they could have used this network of flock cameras that they have, this state police surveillance system that they have, and they could have either followed her with the flocks, or they would have just been able to identify. I mean, she lived in the neighborhood. They could have just, I mean, they literally would have been able to find her in the neighborhood. So if they had simply allowed her to flee and they were going to arrest her then, they could simply have just gone to her home and arrested her. What they did is they specifically, now, can I concretely say, this person specifically did this and he escalated and he went out to try to kill this person? That would not be responsible of me to say that. What I can say is 4 things specifically. Number 1, he was not near and or in front of the vehicle prior to her attempting to leave. Number 2, she is clearly and visibly seen on camera waving agents off, waving them out, yielding. She's seen yielding to the agents. It appears that then she's instructed herself to leave. The vehicles pull up, and then this individual stands in front of her vehicle. This individual works for DHS. DHS has a verifiable history of its agents lying to use force by standing in front of vehicles. This is a major story. The pattern of behavior by federal immigration enforcement has been documented, reported on, and reviewed by independent experts. September 2025, an ICE agent fatally shot a man during a traffic stop in the Chicago area. The families obviously called for justice. The FBI has investigated. We do not know what happened with that investigation. In December, ICE agents in Minneapolis knelt on a woman's back as she lay atop a snowbank and tried to drag her to a car. The Minneapolis police chief criticized that. Now, we have a mother of 3, a U.S. citizen, shot in the head in a residential street. Federal agents showing up at a high school at school dismissal time, tackling teachers, traumatizing kids, and an entire school district that is protecting their children from federal agents by just shutting school down. Here's what's actually happening, okay? Children in America are too afraid to go to school. Families in America are being ripped apart. Communities are being occupied. Local police chiefs are warning federal agents to leave. Teachers are being tackled, and a woman who was trying to protect her neighbors is now dead. We've stumbled on something significant. We've stumbled on something that verifiably proves that they're not acting in good faith. And now the greatest concern, the tragedy has unfortunately already happened. The next tragedy we have to really keep our focus on, and what I'm encouraging you to really pinpoint here, is we cannot allow a cover-up of what happened. We cannot allow a cover-up. We have to pressure Minneapolis law enforcement, the BCA in Minneapolis, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, Governor Tim Walz. We have to demand an independent investigation. They had him out of Minneapolis within an hour. No competent, trustworthy federal agency would exfiltrate someone in less than an hour if they had the intention of conducting a fair investigation. No one. So obviously we try to connect all the dots whenever possible. Normally on the show, we cover about 6 stories a day, the difference of what's happening. I do see people talking about what happened in Portland, where I'm actually still really closely looking at that. But again, you have a situation where they're saying it's vehicles. What I would close this out with is the real pattern and practice of fear, okay? And what I'm concerned about. I already know that the government is acting in bad faith. We all know that, okay? We all know the government is acting in bad faith. We all know that they can't be trusted to investigate themselves. What my concern is now is that you or your neighbor or your friend or your family says, I'm just going to stay out. I'm not going to get involved. I see the ICE agents. I'm getting as far away from them as possible. I'm not going to record them. The last thing I want to do is record an ICE agent and end up dead on the news. that is a verifiably realistic fear for you to be able to have. Okay. 7 courts have independently verified that recording ICE and police activity from a safe distance without interfering is perfectly legal, and it is your First Amendment right. What I would close out the show with by telling you this, something I'm a huge, huge proponent of. Your rights are never taken from you. You give up your rights. Do not give up your rights out of fear. On the show here on Rebel Radio and on the Ignition News, a longtime tenant, well before any of this, one of the things that we encourage is we encourage the practice of witnessing. In this terrible time of ours, when we see what is happening from the government, the tendency is to turn away or to put your head down. The reality is we need witnesses. We need people to document. We need people to record what is happening. We need you to save that information, okay? And let me give you a really good example of how you can't trust your phone, your apps, all that shit. So I posted this video yesterday, which is just absolutely blowing up. I posted this report from 2013. It's been seen almost 200,000 times, almost 1 million times across all platforms. I'm very protective of my content, but I actually encourage people to go download that content. TikTok does not allow people to download that video now. I have all the settings correct. I checked twice. TikTok straight up doesn't allow people to download that video. Why is that? I don't know. That video got almost no traction right away, but it was the brute force of people sharing that video that it's now being seen widely. So don't steal my shit. Okay? That's my first. Please don't steal my shit. I work really hard to do this. But if you want to go screen record that one video to save it for history, I'm not going to come after you for that. Now, don't go posting it somewhere else and telling people it's yours. I know, the dog is not stoked. But I'm telling you, that's why you can't trust TikTok or Meta to save this information. So here's a couple best practices that I'll close out with. I'm going to give you this information. This is my information. It's not legal information. I'll tell you what I do and how I do it. Number 1, I have a dash cam in my vehicle that records the front and the back view. My particular dash cam actually streams live to the internet. So it's always recording. So that's one thing that I do. So, and what I do in situations where I know I'm going to be potentially, quote, witnessing something is I will strategically, put that camera from my car in the situation where I know the camera can see what's happening. Now, the reason I use a streaming camera in my car is if police arrest me or if ICE arrests me or something like that happens, a lot of the times what they will do is they will take your SD card and then all of a sudden your SD card goes missing, right? So that's why in my instance, I use that camera. I understand not everybody has that instance. For you in that situation, your best next course is to use an online streaming service like TikTok or YouTube Live or Facebook Live or whatever that is. If you're in a situation where you need to archive that information, you need to get it out somewhere, and you think, oh, someone might arrest me and delete this footage, stream it live on TikTok, stream it live on Facebook. That's the number 2. The second thing is I always have with me, and again, I've been doing this a long time. I recognize that everybody can do this. I always have with me, so I've got my dash cam. I obviously have my phone. I always have with me a GoPro on sort of like a body. It's not a strap. It's like almost like a necklace. I don't know how else to describe it. And I've set up the GoPro specifically so that I can just instantly one tap and it records. And then the next thing that I do instantly is I've got it set up so that immediately after I record something, it goes to my phone. The phone goes and uploads it to the cloud. So those are sort of additional digital items that I do. I will tell you that between the car and the GoPro setup and situation, it was an expensive investment initially, but factually, just the dash cam on my car alone has paid for itself hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over. Okay. And then obviously the last part is understand your local jurisdiction and recording laws. I talk about recording information all the time. I'm an expert in my state's recording laws. I'm not an expert in your state's recording laws. So the last piece of advice there is understand what is your state's recording laws. And the last thing I would tell you is if you really want to be good at this, put the police in their place. Put the police in their place. Okay. I'm not going to get into my opinion of American law enforcement right now on the show today. But if a lot of police have what they call community engagement officers, and those are people whose whole job is to make the cops look nice. It's their job. They post the social media, they do the meetings, they do community safety meetings, all those kinds of things. Put that person on the spot. Ask them what the department's policies are for recording. Ask what the department recommends in terms of how to safely record police activity. And by the way, if you can, you should record them saying that. So then you have the police in their own words telling you what's legal and what's not. That way, if a cop tries to arrest you from recording from the sidewalk, well, enjoy that yacht, enjoy that lawsuit. Dude, my dog is like going nuts right now. Okay. Maybe it's the cops. Anyways, so those are just a few of my sort of best practices, right? I've got the streaming camera in my car all the time. If you can't do that, you can get a dash camera from, Amazon. Well, you can't get a $20 one. A $40, $50 dash camera from Amazon is better than nothing at all. It's significantly better than nothing at all. You can get a used GoPro on eBay for like $100. That's another recommendation that I would have. And if you're going to be recording something with your phone as your last resort, my recommendation always is tell your dog to be quiet while you're filming your news show. But secondarily, stream it live instead of just recording it on your phone. Most of your platforms are going to have, like TikTok's a good example. This TikTok live we're on right now, it's both recording and streaming and then archiving that information for later. So if a cop came and stole my phone right now, turned my phone off, that's going to be sitting somewhere nonetheless. Take my phone, throw it away, do whatever they want to. But that feed is going to be sitting there. And so if the police or ICE or CBP says, we're going to go delete that video from TikTok, I'm not going to lie to you. It's possible that they could somehow manage to make that happen, especially with the phone call from the president. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, that's a very real possibility. But if your stream on Facebook or TikTok or Google or YouTube or whatever that is, if someone from CBP tries to go delete that or erase that, there's at least going to be a paper trail. And so someone somewhere is going to have an email that says, hey, go delete the Ignition News from January 9th, right? That's going to be somewhere. Anyways, I wish I had a better way to wrap all the stories together, but the most concrete way is as followed. Number one, it takes a lot of time, energy, and effort to do the work that we're doing. So if you find value in the Ignition News, please go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, whatever that is. Number two, now is a more important time than ever for you to familiarize yourself not only with what your rights are, but what your setup is and how you're going to prepare to respond in that instance. Something I tell people always, people never practice what they're going to do when they find themselves in these situations. And if you don't practice, your nervous, anxious self is going to fuck it up. It just is. And that is what DHS, ICE, the cops, that's what they're expecting you to do. They're expecting you to get nervous. They're expecting you to do something stupid. They're expecting you to have anxiety. When you act in anxiety, that's when they're going to act. Oh, you're obstructing, and then you panic and you put your hands up, you do something wrong. That's not only do they expect you to do that, they train for that to happen. So practice how you're going to responsibly behave. By the way, if you do something, if you practice with someone else, a neighbor, for example, say we're going to do a constitutional audit at the courthouse, or we're going to do a constitutional observation of ICE in our communities. And they try to accuse you of obstructing law enforcement. And then your neighbor says, oh, no, wait, we specifically trained beforehand on how to do this correctly. Oh, and by the way, we engaged with our community safety officer. Oh, and by the way, we were recording everything. So take that power away from them. On Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, we are literally giving you the power back to take your communities back. Take away the power of their fear by preparing for it. That's the final lesson of today's show. It's been a great Ignition News. Go find this episode, download it from your favorite podcasting platform. We'll see you back for another episode of the Ignition News. Thanks, everybody.